let me know if you can hear me okay. I am so glad to be back. I missed everybody, and I hope that you had a wonderful new year and that so far you are having a great 2022. We are having a fantastic time, so I hope you are too. We are glad to be back. And if you're new here, we always love new victims here in the crypt, so say hello and let us know you're here and where you're from. So we're going to give everybody a little bit of time to get in here, get settled, do all the things. Again, I always let everybody know that we so much love what we do here. It's fun. It's a part of us. And you guys are part of the family. And we really enjoy being able to bring this content to you. And the very, very best thing that you can do to support us is to just share our content. Share our content, tag people, in the comments, or share them to your groups, pages, things like that, because that really does help. You can also go to our websites and find all our past streams and things like that. Lots of interesting things. And if you've noticed, we've got some new merch out for 2022, some absolutely amazing pieces. So you guys need to go out and grab you some swag. We do have a special that is running until Monday the 24th. You get 20% off at checkout if you use the code PBDCTV. It's super easy. Pick you up some stickers or some t-shirts or, a problematic bag or, something like that to throw all your troublemaking supplies into. So we'll get started here in just a minute. We've got a lot to unpack here. This is a huge subject as far as it's so convoluted. There's so much information and so much history here that it's probably going to be a 2 or 3 parter, to be very, very honest with you. Because like I said, there's just so much here, getting into the history, getting into the folklore, getting into a lot of the spooky haints and boogers and boo hags and things like that. So that's going to be a lot of fun. But I'm going to see what's going on here in the chats real quick before we get started. And I hope you like it. It's going to be a lot of fun. So let's see what's going on here in the chats real quick. All right, so I see Liz in the comments. And yes, go vote for Nightmare Clowns in the SAS competition. Hi, Dizzy. Hi, Maud at Psycho Bunny Death Cult. Let's see who else we have. And I'm going to try not to put my finger in everybody's face. Let's see. Hi, Tyler. How are you? Hi, Stephen P. Kitty Cat. Hi, Henry. Hey, Nadine. Oh, my goodness. Hi, Mikey. We've got a bunch of people in here tonight. And, my poor old sockets are getting so bad. It's about time to change out my eyeballs. All right, so tonight, I'll give you a hint of what we're talking about. Lots of stereotypes that are kind of contributed to this area of our country. We're not going to have to travel too far. This is here in the United States. But the history here is weaved into the very fabric of these mountains that we're going to talk about tonight. From the vine-covered nooks and crannies to even the spider's web, the rivers and the streams and the creeks run warm with the paranormal, and witchcraft whispers on foggy mornings just before the church bells ring, and on moonlit nights as the whippoorwill sings in some distant holler. Where superstition runs deep, echoes of haints in the graveyard, and chills when an unseen guest is found knocking at your door. These hills have been soaked in blood and bone, and have resounded with the cries of life and death more times than our minds can even comprehend. Her soil has been stained by the blood of soldiers and slaves alike. These same struggles have given rise to the culture today in the form of tradition, folk song, art, and of the cunning people. Our weather in this area and seasons and landscape shaped the way we farmed and planted, the foods we hunted and grew, and the remedies we created for ourselves, when the mountains locked us in. But it wasn't just with us that the mountain did this. They've been shaping the cultural practices and magic of people as long as they have been inhabited, I should say. Even long before the Cherokee put down roots here. Lurking within the forest and the verdant green valleys of this very veritable menagerie of alleged weird beasts, phantom creatures, and out-of-place animals running the gambit of the plausible to the absurd. Now, what we're talking about tonight is the Appalachian Mountains. Now, the Appalachian Mountains, which often is called and should be called the Appalachia. In other words, if you say it wrong, they will throw an Appalachia. The Appalachians, they are a system of mountains in the eastern to northeastern North America. The Appalachians, we know today, first formed roughly 480 million years ago during the, and I'm going to do my best to say this, Ordovician period. They once reached elevations similar to those of the Alps and the Rocky Mountains before experiencing natural erosion. Now, the Appalachian Mountains stretch from southern New York to North Georgia, Alabama, and Mississippi. It encompasses 420 counties across 13 states and spans 205,000 square miles. Moreover, the area surrounding the mountains, known as the Appalachian region, is home to at least 25 million people. It also has a celebrated ecosystem that includes 140 species of trees, 250 species of birds, and so much more. Besides housing a variety of wildlife, the region fuses different ethnic groups to create the diverse traditions and customs of the Appalachian people. Although the term Appalachian refers to the entire mountain range, some of the more well-known subranges include the Blue Ridge Mountains and the Great Smoky Mountains. The highest peak of the Appalachian Mountains can be found in North Carolina. However, scientists deduce that they were once as tall as the Himalayas. Of course, this would have been in their early years, when they formed long before any human could catch a glimpse of them. As the United States Geological Survey explains, the rocks at the core of the Appalachian Mountains formed a very long time ago when North America and South America merged together. However, the mountains did not form all at once. They would pop up but erode over time. Now, this cycle continued. As one mountain set crumbled, another would emerge. The consensus among scientists, and I find this extremely interesting, is that the Appalachian Mountains are the oldest mountains in the world. However, there is not absolute certainty. Now, scientists do point to the crystalline rocks found in the Appalachian Mountains as the primary reason for giving it the title of the oldest. These rocks are thought to be between 1.1 billion years to 540 million years old. Now, the Appalachians, even at 500 million years of age, are extremely old and were once again higher than the Rockies or the Alps, but have been exposed to weather and erosion for so long, we no longer consider them very tall. They are separated from the eastern coastal plain by a massive fall line. The system is a mixture of mountains, valleys, high ridges, wide and dissecting plateaus. Dense forests cover much of the system, and some rock structures date back to the Precambrian and early Paleozoic eras. Now, on the eastern side of the southern Appalachian Mountains, between the Blue Ridge and the fall line, is a rolling plateau known as the Piedmont. And if you know at least rudimentary about the Appalachian range, A lot of these names will sound familiar. So there are rolling plateaus known as the Piedmont, which takes up a large proportion of Georgia, the Carolinas, and Virginia. Now, on the west side is the Cumberland Plateau, stretching from West Virginia to Alabama. And in between the Great Smoky Mountains and the Cumberland is a hilly region called the Ridge and Valley, which stretches from central Alabama up to New York State. It's a very long ridgeline. Now, the interesting thing about the Appalachian Mountains that you may not realize is that they are, or I should say once were the same mountain ridge as the Scottish Highlands and the Atlas Mountains in Africa. They were the same mountain range. Now, the Central Pangea Mountains was a prominent mountain ridge in the central part of the supercontinent Pangea that extended across the continent from northeast to southwest. Now, several native tribes lived in the Appalachian Mountains before the arrival of white settlers. In the South, one of the most prominent tribes was the Cherokee. According to Cherokee legend, the Great Smoky Mountains were formed by a giant buzzard circling around the earth after a great flood. When the buzzard reached the Smokies, he plummeted to earth in exhaustion, where his massive wings touched the earth. The mountain valleys then appeared. And today, there are still some descendants of the original Cherokees living in the southern Appalachian Mountains. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then we're going to get into sort of the basic spookiness of this area. Next week is going to be really getting into like the Haints and a lot of like the stories that come off the Appalachian Trail, and we're going to get more into that. But tonight we're going to discuss kind of a overview of some Cherokee folklore, monsters and boogabears and things like that. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And Nadine says, Northern Cherokee Nation present. Well, good. I hope that you enjoy this. And then Stephen P. Kitty Cat says, people, I'm insulted. Hi, Kayla. How are you? And Liz says, West Side. And then Maud on Psychomantium 13 says, Sierra Nevada present, throws up the gang sign, Hexas. And then Mikey says, I wouldn't mind living in the mountains. Well, I have traveled to the Appalachian Mountains. Actually, a lot of my family is from the lower plateau of the Appalachian Mountains. And it's a beautiful, beautiful place. It's absolutely beautiful, but a lot of spookiness, a whole lot of spookiness that might make you think twice about actually visiting there sometime. Let's see. And then Psychomantium 13 says, you got a pretty mouth. And then Calvin says, what's that? Do I hear banjos? You know, and we're going to get into that a little bit, a lot of the misconceptions. And they actually, a lot of those of what we think of now actually come from one specific article that was released, I believe, in the 1930s. And really how diverse the culture is there. But we're going to get into that here in just a minute. And then Psychomantium Mont says, hello, Calvin. Hope the voodoo curse is treating you well. And honestly, Mother De La Morte wants to know, how is the voodoo curse treating everyone today? Let's see. I spilt a little bit of my Coca-Cola down my shirt. So I that's really all I have to say about that. All right. My goodness, you guys are chatty. All right. So let's go ahead and get into this. All right. So, and again, I'm not going to get into, and it's not out of disrespect. It's just, I'm going to kind of veer away from the more historical atrocities that, of what have happened in these mountains. There's been a lot of atrocities in these mountains, and go more with like some of the folklore. But I do want to make mention of some things. So it's not that I'm blowing them off or anything like that. It's just there are so many historical rabbit holes to go down in this area that this could be a whole season of podcasts, just this mountain range and all the weird and horrible and terrible things that have happened in this land. Even though it's beautiful, it's got a lot of dark history. So, all right. So now most of the original settlers were immigrants, of course, withstanding, of course, the first tribe. But most of the original settlers, as we know them, were immigrants from the English Isles. Although some German and Dutch settlers also made the journey, they brought with them colorful traditions, beliefs, folklores, dialects, to the point of even Elizabethan era words and phrases, which one can find in the works of Shakespeare, as well as religious and healing arts and practices. As time passed, the isolation of mountain life transformed many of these things. Words were mispronounced, phrases and sentences were rearranged, and the new words were created to fit the rugged mountain life these settlers faced. Folklore, traditions, and practices also merged and blended together. Appalachian people are considered a separate culture made up of many unique backgrounds: Native Americans, Irish, English, Scottish, and then a third section of descendants of the German and Polish immigrants, all blended together across this region. The Cherokees learned to coexist with their European settlers and even fought with them against the British during the War of 1812. But sadly, the discovery of gold in North Georgia, the federal government made a concerted effort to drive the Cherokee out, culminating in the infamous Trail of Tears removal of 1838. Now, just again, I wanted to touch on it because it was just absolutely devastating, was the Trail of Tears, which 16,000 people were violently removed from their homeland. And of course, that is only what is, put on paper. I'm sure it was much more. They were forced to walk 1,000 miles west at gunpoint, exposed to unbearable cold and disease for 6 months. Out of the 16,000 people, only 12,000 survived the walk. The Trail of Tears was a genocidal event, clearing a people group from a land they shared with ancestors reaching as far back as the time of Christ. The 12,000 survivors continued to live in present-day Oklahoma, but they left behind some who managed to escape the violent removal. These 300 or 400 people are said to have hid in the mountains of western North Carolina. Now, according to Cherokee oral tradition, a man named Tusley, and again, I apologize if I mispronounced that, and his family were a part of this group of refugees. He and his family were said to have killed 2 soldiers who attempted to capture them before being hunted down by other soldiers and striking a deal. He could live and give up his people's location, or sacrifice himself and ensure the safety of his people in hiding. Of course, Tusley was said to have insisted on his execution to protect his people. Because of Tusley, the Cherokee people survived and now call themselves the Eastern Band of the Cherokee Nation. They are a tribe of 14,000 members whose land includes the border of the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. Now let's get into a little bit more of the folklore and things like that surrounding the Cherokee. Now, the culture of Appalachia consists of arts and crafts, foods, myths, and folklore. Multiple ethnic influences, like I said, also included African, German, Native American, an array of stereotypes. Now, this was written by Wendy Ines in a article in Future Stories Latest News. And I like how she put this, and this is kind of getting into kind of the stereotypical, where it came from, and kind of what Hollywood based a lot of their stuff off of moving forward. So now, perhaps no group of people has a higher list of stereotypes than those who call the Appalachian Mountains home. When many people think of the Appalachian Mountain people, what normally comes to mind is Snuffy Smith smoking a corncob pipe, wearing overalls, and being lazy. Many of the stereotypes that people think of today originated from a single publication called A Strange Land and Peculiar People, which was published, and I was wrong on the date, in 1873. Now, mountain people trace their roots to the Scottish people to whom England's King James I gave Irish lands in an effort to allow two of England's biggest enemies to basically eliminate each other. Otherwise known as the Ulster Irish, named after the area of Ireland they received, or what we know now as Scotch Irish. Faced with continued hardship in Ulster, the Scotch-Irish people began a massive migration to the colonies between 1720 and 1775. Now, unfortunately, proper colonial society regarded the Scotch-Irish as an ignorant horde and shunned them. So the Scotch-Irish people headed west until they found a place that closely resembled the mountainous lands from which they came, the Appalachians. And little did they know, it actually was a mountain range descended from the very Scottish Highlands from which they came. Now, the Appalachian culture is often called clannish, and indeed it is, reflecting the clan structure that exists to this day in rural Scotland and Ireland, and created a society extremely difficult to penetrate by outsiders, including law enforcement. When outsiders began asking questions, mountain people closed ranks and protected their own. Now, mountain people have their own dialect of English, and while it may seem unsophisticated, it is actually closer to its origins than the dialect most speak today. Within this unique dialect, each village or town has its own syntax, understandable to each other, but not necessarily to outsiders. Now, Appalachian Mountain people not only share a long-standing heritage, but they also share severe poverty. However, those in Appalachia did enjoy a large self-reliant existence for a time. They depended on farming to support their large families, that is, until the fencing laws prevented them from grazing livestock on public lands. Now, at the same time, and you see a lot of this has merged into traditional folklore, the railroads and coal mines invaded Appalachia, forcing many mountain people to abandon farming and go to work for the railroad or coal mines to feed their family. And to this day, most still have some sort of connection to the mines, whether it's directly or indirectly through family. Now, faith is also a paramount to mountain people, with more than 80 different varieties of Baptist and Pentecostal faiths found in Appalachia. If a particular group became dissatisfied with their church, they simply moved down the road and began a new one. It wasn't uncommon to see churches in old barns, homes, or even abandoned train cars. A unique church found only in Appalachia at I guess its origination is the snake handling church, also called sign followers. They believe their faith allows them to handle venomous snakes and drink poison unharmed. Now, snake handling is actually illegal in every state except West Virginia, but many continue to do it anyway. Gospel music, along with bluegrass and other types of mountain music, are popular forms of entertainment as well as an integral part of worship. The music itself has strong roots in the Celtic music of both Scotland and Ireland. Now, while many stereotypes abound regarding Appalachian people, few of them are actually true. In truth, Appalachian Mountain people are a proud, ingenious, complex population of people with their own unique culture that has resisted change for the last 2 centuries. Mix that with such an ancient and expansive mountain range, it is perhaps no surprise that there are many mysteries to be found within its green, rolling peaks, spanning range of inexplicable phenomenon from hauntings to mystery creatures, bizarre humanoids, mysterious underground bases, lost tribes, witches, and lots of magic. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick, and then we are going to go to a commercial break, and then we're going to talk about Raven Mocker. So interesting tale, interesting tale. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And then Mike said, wasn't it Appalachian people that got called hillbillies? Yes. And from what I have read, and of course I'm don't know everything, and I'm sure that there are some here that know much more than I do. But it kind of intertwines a lot with the coal mines and with the word redneck. You know, a lot of people associate, well, and I want to say redneck actually comes from probably a lot of different sources. But as far as connection with coal mines, a lot of it had to do with a very big skirmish and disagreement that occurred between mine workers and unions way back a long time ago. And so a lot of the ones that supported the miners would wear red bandanas around their necks. And that's where a lot of people associated coal miners with rednecks, when in actuality it had more to do with a disagreement between working conditions of the unions, the coal mine unions, and the union workers, or the coal miners, I should say. But it was an insult at that time to call them hillbillies. And I think that's where a lot of that came from. So, and then Mike says, I can hear them screaming in the forest at night. They prey with snakes and poisons my mind. There are a lot of superstitions with things that you will hear in the night and see within this mountain range. Certain things that you should not do. You do not whistle at night. Never whistle at night because you can call things to you that you do not want to call to you. Yeah, and getting with the snake handlers and things like that, I think one of the things that I find so, and see, I've gotten completely down another rabbit hole, I find so unique is that there's such a unique blend of, now there's going to be a lot of people that disagree, but from my personal experience and having water witches in my family, there is seems to be a very big connection between what we would think of as almost like traditional witchcraft mixed with a lot of the Haitian beliefs, because you had a lot of escaped slaves that escaped to the mountainous ranges to hide, as well as a lot of the Cherokee beliefs and things like that. There's a lot of, and you hear a lot today, wildcrafting or granny magic. It's almost like what you would think of as, at least for me, like traditional hoodoo and witchcraft, where there's like, they will heal you, but they have no problem like cursing your ass too. But their pantheon is Christian based. Very unique. It's very, very unique. Very common to like the northern parts of the Appalachians, like the powwow and Ozark magic of like Pennsylvania and things like that. Just a lot of neat stuff. And then Nadine says, not whistling at night, you'll summon the Wendigo or the knot deer. Yes, the knot deer are fascinating. I don't know why, and it may be just I'm wrong, but I think the Wendigo, for me, I always associate it with more of like the Western Indian tribes. But the Cherokee have certain witches, I should say, shapeshifters, that to me are very, very reminiscent of like a southern version of the Wendigo or the Skinwalker. But yes, the knot deer are terrifying. And if you don't know what a knot deer is, go check it out. They're scary. They're scary. And then Calvin says that my great-grandmother was a Cherokee. And we're going to get into a particular race that was found within the Appalachian Mountains that they still are doing DNA on. And they're like, if you've got some sort of connection bloodline wise to the Appalachian range and what they consider the Appalachian Mountains, most likely you've probably got some of this DNA in you as well. That they're even linking possibility that it could have been maybe the lost people of Roanoke. You never know, but we're going to get into that next week or the week after. Like I said, there's just so much that goes along with this area, and we're probably going to run over tonight too, just to let you know. But it's a Saturday night, so. And then Calvin says, my mother is, Mother Sod is from Kentucky. Yeah. And North Carolina. See, we're from North Carolina, North Georgia, Northern Alabama, the Cloudland Range and things like that, Calvin. And then Maud over at Sacramento 13 says, my grandmother was from the backwoods of Arkansas. And those people are absolutely amazing and loving. Yeah, and I think, and let me know if I'm wrong, but I think like the Arkansas area, that would be kind of considered like the Ozarks. Am I correct? Because I believe the Ozarks kind of split off a little bit from the Appalachians. It's still all the same range, but it's just, I think that area is kind of more, they refer to it as like the Ozark Mountains, I think. Yes, lots of Andrew Jacksons as well, Nadine. You're absolutely correct. Oh, let's see. And then Mikey says, kind of like here with the lechosa, I hope I said that right. If you whistle at it, supposedly it will come after you. Or also if you offer it anything. Yeah, it's usually best to ignore things like that. You definitely don't want to get their attention. So, all right, so we're going to go to a quick commercial break, and then we're going to be back and we're going to talk about the raven mocker. So see you in a minute.
This is Mikey from Out of the Ordinary, and you're watching PBDC TV.
morning when I'm listening to music and getting a little bit of time for some creepy research, I'm always representing with my PBDC merch. What a better way to have a cup of coffee in the morning.
Don't forget to check out our other cool merch at rootsbleedred.com. That's rootsbleedred.com.
This is Professor Edgar Fluffosaurus from Spooky Tales with Steve the Cat, and when I'm not hosting Monster Chat or knocking down small Japanese cities, I'm watching PBDC TV. Now back to the show.
And we're back. All right, so let's get into our first tale.
The bodies of chaos are coming for you. The bodies of chaos are coming for you.
Good morning!
Those damn bunnies. Oh my God. All right, so the Raven Mocker. So now the Raven Mocker is an evil spirit and the most feared, or one of the most feared, of the Cherokee witches. According to Cherokee mythology, it robs the sick and dying of their heart. Now, there are a couple of different stories that go along with the Raven Mocker. I just got the one that seemed to be the most, like you could find the most information on. Now, it robs the sick and dying of their heart, normally appearing as old, withered men and women, or turning completely invisible except to certain medicine men. They take to the air in a fiery shape, and with the sounds of a raven's cry and a strong wind as they hunt for their next victim. Now, after tormenting and killing their victim by slitting the victim's head, they then consume the heart. Now, they do this without leaving a mark on the victim's skin, and add a year to their life for every year that the slain would have lived. The sound of a raven mocker means that someone in the area will soon die. Now, raven mockers are normally invisible when feeding, but those with strong medicine can not only spot them, but can cause them to die within 7 days. Medicine men will sometimes stand guard over the dying to prevent raven mockers from stealing the heart of the afflicted. Now, raven mockers are feared and envied by other witches of the Cherokee folklore, and their bodies may be abused by said witches after death. Perhaps the most well-known mystery creature of the region is the Appalachian Black Panther. I didn't put a stop point. So anyway, so the raven mockers are feared and envied by other witches of the Cherokee folklore, and their bodies may be abused by said witches after death. Now, a lot of times they say that if you do not have like a strong medicine man there or a medicine man there to protect the dying, a lot of times what people will assume as like convulsions and things like that as somebody that might be supposedly afflicted by the raven mocker will look like he's having seizures, but he's actually being attacked, which is absolutely terrifying if you think about it. Like, you can see him, you know you're being attacked, but nobody else can see him and only think you're like having some sort of reaction because you're sick or dying. So that's pretty terrifying. At least to me. I don't know. That just seems terrifying. So now, perhaps the most well-known mystery creature of the region is the Appalachian Black Panther. It's an animal that has been reported as far back as the days of early settlers of the area and continues to be sighted even today in both the Appalachians and the Ozarks. There are even historical examples of dead specimens of these black panthers turning up from time to time. One animal was allegedly killed in the 1800s by a settler named Emily Stacy, who shot one with a musket through her own door when it savagely tried to get into her house. Now, additionally, in 1843, a Sir William Gerardine published a compendium of big cats titled The Naturalist Library, Mammalia, Volume 1, Cats, in which he describes 2 species of what he called black cougars that were supposedly killed in America and displayed in London during the 1700s. Now, although it is uncertain of what exact species of cat they were, and the bodies have long since been, basically they're gone, the odd thing is that while it is possible, cougars are not currently known to exhibit any type of melanastic or black phase, as they have never, there's never been any concrete evidence or species found. So in other words, a lot of times certain types of felines or animals in general can go through a melanastic or black phase, usually like when they're going from kittens to adults, or different things like that. Now, you normally only see, there's only really two types of big cats that will do that or have a black color phase, and those are the black panthers, or that become quote unquote black panthers. Those are the jaguars and the leopards, which most are not of this area of the world. Now, whether they come in black or not, the existence of cougars in the Appalachians is in and of itself not completely far-fetched. Although they have been considered extinct in the Appalachian Mountains for over a century, cougars were indeed once found all across the eastern United States. In fact, cougars, also called pumas or mountain lions, were once found throughout the United States and were at one time the most widely distributed large land animal in the Western Hemisphere. When settlers arrived in the Appalachian region in the 1500s, the presence of these fearsome cats caused them to be hunted down. Of course, we have to hunt down everything. And habitual loss and deforestation, as well as, losing their habitat, helped to put the nail in the coffin for cougars on the East Coast until they were all but gone by the 19th century. However, numerous sightings of cougars in the eastern United States, including the Appalachian Mountains, continue to this day. Could these mysterious black panthers be melanistic cougars? There is also the possibility that black jaguars may have roamed into the region. Jaguars were once found in the southwestern United States and are known to be melanistic, so it is perhaps possible that some have managed to make their way to the Appalachians and are responsible for the reports of black panthers in the region. And I have heard those reports ever since I was little, to be very honest with you. Now, regardless of what they are, the fact remains that people continue to insist that black panthers stalk the wilds of the Appalachian Mountains. Now, in addition to big cats, there are also far stranger and indeed larger creatures that have been reported from here for years. One such creature is the Appalachian version of Bigfoot, which in these parts is called the Yahoo. And it is so named for the booming vocalization it's said to produce that sounds like a wailing Yahoo. Now, the creatures are typically reported as being brown in color and somewhat smaller than your stereotypical Sasquatch, standing between 6 to 8 feet tall. Now, unlike their gentler Pacific Northwest cousin, the Yahoo is somewhat infamous for being quite aggressive, highly territorial, and dangerous. It has been speculated that the Yahoo could be a subspecies of Bigfoot. Now, there are tales of the Yahoo, and I think one of the ones that was so disturbing to me was the tale of a Tennessee hunter. And hunters have been known to be attacked by these supposed subspecies of Sasquatch. And he was basically made into a human tree with a old tree trunk. So he was made into a human tree. His limbs were ripped from him and were reassembled to resemble a tree. So that's not what you think of when you think of Sasquatch, or like they referred to the gentler Pacific Northwest version. Now, another large and hairy humanoid creature is said to prowl the Appalachians. It's known as the Dayo, or Dawayo, D-W-A-Y-Y-O, Dawayo. The Dawayo are reported as standing 7 to 9 feet tall, but rather than being ape-like, as with Bigfoot, they are said to look more like a bipedal wolf. So kind of a dog man. We've got dog man going on here, which I have heard reports of as well. Now, they are complete with a bushy tail. The beast has been seen by a variety of witnesses, including hunters, campers, and even park rangers. And there are numerous others who have heard its eerie, piercing howl echoing through the night. Now, like the Yahoo, the Deweyyo is also known for its rather nasty disposition, and various cases of cattle mutilation reported throughout its supposed range have been attributed to this creature. It is said to be feared by dogs, which it will attack without hesitation, and a claim made more sober by, occasional reports of mysteriously mutilated dogs within the mountains. There have also been reports of the Deweyyo lunging at cars from the woods and even attacking people. Now, one report giving under the alias of John Becker describes a farmer coming across a 9-foot-tall wolf man with bristly hair and a prominent tail when he went out to investigate what was causing his dogs to bark so furiously. The monster allegedly reared up and snarled, after which it launched itself at the farmer in a rage, with the man barely able to escape from its slashing claws back into his house as the ferocious creature paced outside before disappearing into the surrounding wilderness. So let's see what's going on in the comments. And we're going to talk about a haint. Maybe a haint. Maybe a phantom. We'll say phantom. We'll say phantom. So, because we're going to get more into the haints next week. But you know, in this area, it's kind of hard to pinpoint whether something is a phantom or a haint or a ghost. But we're going to get into this phantom here in just a minute. Yes, so Liz says, boom, boom, boom. Let me hear you say, way-yo, way-yo. The way-yo. The way-yo, okay. And then Psycho 1813 says, them southern Bigfoots don't like nobody trespassing on their property. Yeah, I've heard they can be quite terrifying. Well, it wasn't a Bigfoot that was ripped apart and put back together to resemble a tree. It was a hunter that was ripped apart and reassembled back into a tree. It was a human tree. Hi, Ange. How are you? So Ange says the voodoo curse should become extinct. Okay, and so Nadine says, they say we don't have mountain lions up here in the Arondack Mountains having gone extinct, but there are stories of sightings. And I'll be really honest with you, Nadine. It's the same thing here. And I remember it was many, many years ago. And I know what the smaller cats sound like, you know, like of like the wildcats and things like that around here. But it sounded like what you would think of as a big cat, like call that we heard one night. It was something I have never heard before and never heard since. But it sounded like what you think of is like what you've heard when you watch some of the YouTube videos and things like that of like the big cats and things. So I absolutely think that there's some sort of big cat in these regions as well. And Chris Ross says cougars have been spotted in bars and dating sites. Yes, cougars do like them young. That's true. And then Mikey said he's going to talk about the faith healers. Faith healers are they're interesting. There's an interesting bunch. There's a lot of that well, I don't want to say faith healing. I mean, there's a lot of faith healing and things like that that kind of get into a lot of these Pentecostal type and Baptist religions that you find in these areas. But you get a lot of like talking the blood out or talking a burn out. A lot of what I just call granny magic, or the cunning people magic. But a lot of them will use like biblical text and things like that. Hi, Lucas. Hi, Adam. All right, so let's see which one. Okay, so we're going to talk about this phantom. It's called the Red-Headed Man. Now, the 1700s were a turbulent time in Western Virginia, and Morgantown was little more than a settlement surrounded by two forts, Fort Kern and Fort Coben. Set on the eastern bank of the, my lord, Monongahela River, in the shadow of Dorsey's Knob, Morgantown was literally the boundary of the colonial settlement. The land to the west over the river was the Ohio country, where legal settlements were prohibited by royal decree. Tensions between the European settlers and Native Americans of the region escalated during this time and threatened the teeniest peace that they had. What little bit of peace they had, it threatened that. Now, early in the spring of 1778, a large Native American raiding party came into Monongahela County bent on revenge. Their murderous rage was the answer to events perpetrated by colonial settlers in the wake of Lord Dumore's War of 1774, which included the murder of Native American families in the surrounding area. So you can kind of understand why they were kind of pissed off. Now, at the time of the raid, a group of settlers were returning with an armed escort from planting corn about a mile from Fort Coben. The natives hid in the bushes on both sides of the road to the fort and effectively ambushed the party on their return, firing into the group before they even saw the natives attacking. Now, amazingly, most of the settlers escaped harm. Only 2 men and 1 horse, who had been part of the armed escort, were casualties of the skirmish. Jacob Miller was shot through the abdomen, tomahawked, and scalped as he died. Another, John Woodfin, who was shot in the thigh, was trapped beneath the weight of his dying horse. Now, as the rest of the party escaped back to Fort Coben, the natives captured John Woodfin. To make an example of those who would attack and kill Native Americans, Woodfin was taken to the rocks on the top of Dorsey Knob. There, overlooking Fort Coben, the natives tied him to 2 slender poles that had been driven into the ground and tied into the form of an X. With each of his arms and legs tied fast to a separate end of a pole, John Woodfin was then systematically flayed from the top of his head all the way down to the base of his neck. His skinless flesh shone blood red as a beacon of warning to the settlers in the fort below. John Woodfin died of his horrible wounds on the top of Dorsey's Knob. His bloody, disheveled corpse remained in view within the settler until the settlers found it safe to retrieve the body for burial in the small cemetery near the fort. So it stayed there for a little while. However, as a result of his tragic death, John Woodfin is anything but resting in peace. Throughout the centuries since his death, there have been many visitors to Dorsey's Knob who have encountered John Woodfin, or as he is comically called, the Red-Headed Man. It is said that over the last 242 years, the Red-Headed Man has approached many unsuspecting visitors to Dorsey's Knob. Day or night, he has been spotted by families on picnics, couples in cars, and hikers exploring the heights of the town's tallest point. But John Woodfin is not a happy ghost. To encounter the Red-Headed Man is an encounter with an angry, vengeful spirit. His goal is to approach a living individual, attack them, and steal the skin from their face and head to replace that which he has lost. During the attacks, his veiny, unhealed flesh still glistens with the gore of his wounds. However, there is protection against the red-headed man. Visitors who know the story will carry with them a small, handmade X, basically 2 sticks tied with twine. They'll either put them on their windshields or carry them in their pockets. Evidently, John Woodfin still fears the apparatus to which he was tied and tortured, even in a miniature version. His bloody end came as an unfortunate side effect of living during a most violent time. And if you ever find yourself on Dorsey's Knob, carry with you the cross of sticks and say a kind word for John Woodfin. All right, so we're going to move a little further south, and we're going to talk about Roan Mountain. Now located in the southeastern United States, standing within the ancient Appalachian Mountains along the border between North Carolina and Tennessee, is the seemingly eternal cloud-clad Roan Mountain. Its long ridge line soars up to 6,285 feet into the sky. It contains 5 separate mountain peaks and is a vast expanse of untouched, dense wilderness holding within the Cherokee National Forest. Pishka Run, and in addition to its rugged Pishka Run National Forest and Roan Mountain State Park, Here, the historic Appalachian Trail does meander by to reach the highest elevation along its run. In addition to its rugged forest, Roan Mountain also has the distinction of having the largest grassy highland meadow called a grassy bald in the entire Appalachian Range. Now, besides all of its natural splendor, the breathtaking vistas, and the Madrid outdoor activities on offer, Roan Mountain has also been the home of various supernatural stories and phenomenon that have captured the imagination even to this day. One of the most well-known strange phenomenon long reported from Roan Mountain is a ghostly choir of disembodied voices said to roam around its high peaks and passes. Such stories go back until at least the early 1800s, when settlers and explorers began to come back with tales of having heard mysterious music and singing voices floating through the wind there. Interestingly, the quality of the unexplained music and even the voices seem to change depending on who hears them, with various descriptions of what the spectral choir sounds like. In some cases, people report having heard the most beautiful, angelic voices they have ever experienced, accompanied by the sound of eternal harps. In others, the sounds took on a more serious dimension, sounding like chaotic screeching and the horrifying wailing and screams of the damned to the symphony of a hellish noise. Whatever they sound like, the ghost choir accumulated many legends about them, such as it was angels or possible demons from hell. And one local historian, Jennifer Bauer, says of it, if the mountain music or the ghost choirs were heard, wind was blowing very hard. People have reported great fear. Those who come across the sounds on Roan Mountain had different tales on what they might be. Some people thought the sounds were fairies. Others thought the mountain music came from the spirits of the Cherokee and the Chawaba Indians, who many years ago fought on top of this very mountain. But others interpret something more menacing. Others felt that what they were hearing was the mountain actually talking to them. Now, some people took them as evil messages. It even felt to some like the devil himself had come up from the depths below to find them. If the choir really is ghosts, then they would apparently not be alone on Roan Mountain. as there are other tales of spectral residents as well. One of these stories involves a decrepit cemetery along a place called Dark Hollow Road, right up against the Roan Mountain. The cemetery is small and unkept, and the majority of its graves are overgrown, unmarked, and occupied by the unknown bodies of the forgotten. But one that is known is the grave of a man named Jenkins. The story goes that sometime in and around the turn of the century, Jenkins was having a rather torrid affair with a local woman named Delilah, who was known for sleeping around with pretty much anything that moved. According to legend, Jenkins was killed one day after being shot, now some say by his jealous wife, who had uncovered the affair. And right after he was buried in the cemetery, young Delilah disappeared without a trace. Now, rumors spread that she had actually been in love with Jenkins and had crawled into his coffin to be with him, allowing herself to be buried alive in order to stay with her lover even in death. Whether this is true or not, it has been reported ever since that cars that drive by or park there will be rocked or bumped by unseen forces and they're said to be the restless spirits of Delilah. So let's see what's going on in the comments real quick. And we're going to talk about Spearfinger. I learned a couple of things about Spearfinger I did not know, and I found them pretty interesting. And then Psychomantia Mod says that they have lots of mountain lions in their area. Are there banshees from the Appalachians? Well, it depends. If you're asking me kind of in general, Mikey, a lot of Scottish or Scotch-Irish people do believe that the banshee actually, like each banshee may belong to a particular family. So the banshee will follow the family. So I would say yes. You hear a lot of stories, especially when I was very, very young. You hear a lot of like death omens and things like that that came from a lot of the mountain people. Things from, certain cries and sounds to after someone died, you would see the devil swinging from the rafters of the home. Just all kinds of things like that. So I would say yes, there are probably banshees in the Appalachians. Okay, so Chris says, I'm surprised you don't have your own page, Mother. I have looked for it many times. It is one of the, a shoemaker's children has no shoes. That's all I can say. I was just talking about this the other day to a cot, and I said, I've got to make me a page. I've got to make me a page. But I pour, we all pour so much into pages and channels that we have. I forget about it sometimes. I just forget about it. And then Adam says, Dracos agrees. Those raven mockers are truth. All right. So let's get into Spearfinger, because yeah, we're already running over. So all right. So let's see. We finished with poor old Delilah, who crawled herself up into a casket. So we're going to talk about Spearfinger. Now, Spearfinger roamed the mountains between what would become North Carolina and Tennessee. I'm sure that there are other variations of her tale as well. And they say that even though the Cherokee caught and destroyed her, you can still hear her shrieks and cackles throughout the mountain night. Now, Spearfinger had a taste for human livers, especially those belonging to the Cherokee children. So parents used the legend of Spearfinger to warn children to stay close to the village. In autumn, the Cherokee tribe would burn brush fires to clear the land so they could find fallen chestnuts for winter. But Spearfinger would use the fires to locate their villages. She would come in the guise of an old woman, fooling Cherokee children into trusting her because she appeared to be a village elder. She would offer to brush their hair until they fell asleep, and then she would stab them with her finger through the back of their neck or the heart and withdraw their liver, which she would devour. She is described as having a mouth red with blood. She had a song that she'd sing as she moved through the mountains with her raven friend. Liver, I eat it. It flows better. I assume in the original Cherokee language it does. And I have so many questions about the liver eating song. Like, okay, how would you know that Spearfinger is nearby? Like, would you recognize the liver eating song? I mean, I imagine you would hear it once. But I have so many questions about the liver eating song. Eyes behind the curtain, we have got to find a liver eating song. Like, this is going to stay on my mind. So though she most often appeared as an old lady, she could be anything she wanted. Another child, a friend, an animal. She was made of stone, so no weapon forged by man could stop her. Her only weakness was her heart, which she carried in her hand for protection. Her enemy, Stone Man, who also ate livers, so he wasn't exactly helpful to the Cherokee either, was her enemy. Now, she and Stone Man also had powers to move boulders and rocks. Now, Spearfinger created a great rock bridge through the air to travel from mountain to mountain, but this angered the higher beings, who destroyed it with their lightning. The remains of the bridge can still be visible today, near her hunting ground of Whiteside in Jackson County, North Carolina, which is far to the south, close to the Georgia border, known as Thunder Mountain. Whiteside offers some of the highest sheer cliffs in the Appalachian Range. But Spearfinger didn't limit herself to a single place. She moved throughout the mountains, along streams, and through the Nantahala passes of West North Carolina. She frequently came to the Chickawee Mountains and walked down to the Little River in the Walland in Blount County, seeking out her prey. And if I'm not mistaken, Blount County, I'm sure there's probably another one, but there is a Blount County in Alabama. A lot of creepy stuff in Blount County, Alabama. Now, Spearfinger was a creature of stealth. Her attack left no scars. Even as she used her finger to draw out the victim's liver, it often took days for her victims to die. Now, eventually, the Cherokees set a trap for Spearfinger, digging a deep pit and disguising it as one would for a tiger trap. So a punji pit, basically. They then set a fire to attract the mountain witch's attention. Soon, an elderly woman came along the trail and fell into the pit, revealing herself to be the witch. The Cherokee warriors' arrows, however, had no effect on the stone-skinned witch, who taunted them with her liver-eating song. And I want to know what this liver-eating song is. Eventually, a titmouse, which is a type of bird, came and told the hunters to aim for her heart. But the hunters, not knowing the witch carried her heart in her hand, aimed for her chest with little impact. When that didn't work, the hunters caught the titmouse and cut its tongue out, and the bird is forever known to the Cherokee as a liar. Finally, a chickadee came and landed on the hand which carried the heart. The hunters severed her heart from her hand, in which killed the witch, earning the chickadee a reputation among the Cherokee as a truth teller. Now, if the bird perches near a loved one's home while they are away, you can expect a safe and happy return for the traveler. Now, Stone Man saw Spearfinger's death as a warning to himself, but soon went back to his old liver-eating ways. Stone Man was even more powerful with rocks and stones than Spearfinger, and moved about the mountains with a staff that could man stones and lead him to his victims. The Cherokee eventually conquered Stone Man as well. Stone Man could not bear the sight of menstruating women. And according to legend, the sight of 7 menstruating women would kill him. So the Cherokee arranged 7 women where Stone Man, in the guise of an old man, would come. By the second woman, Stone Man was vomiting blood, and by the 7th, he had fallen weak. The medicine man pinned him to the ground and built a great fire over him. Stone Man called for bear and deer and all the animals of the mountain, but he eventually succumbed to the fire. And I'm going to leave you with one last story. Skinned Tom. Have you seen the ghost of Skinned Tom? Blood red bones with all his skin gone. Ooh, 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 ooh. Wouldn't it be chilly with no skin on? Now, in rural Tennessee, there lived a young man named Tom. He was handsome, witty, charming, and athletic. What's more, Tom had an eye for the ladies, and he couldn't resist their charms, and they couldn't resist his as well. Every girl in town eventually fell for Tom's good looks, but he was never satisfied. As soon as he had romanced one girl, he would break up with her and move to the next. Before long, Tom had dated almost every single girl in the area. Now, in search of more romance, Tom moved to new pastures and began driving to the next town over, hoping to meet more girls. Soon, he came across a beautiful young lady named Eleanor. She had long blonde hair and bright blue eyes and a curvaceous figure. Tom was smitten with Eleanor, and they began dating. There was just one problem. Eleanor was already married. But Tom didn't let that deter him. In fact, he enjoyed the excitement of sneaking around and having an affair with a married woman. The pair would often meet late at night in the local lover's lane and make out in Tom's car. Tom and Eleanor made little effort to keep their fling a secret, and before too long, the folks in the town began to gossip. Eventually, her husband got wind of what was going on and was driven insane with jealousy. He vowed to get revenge on the two of them. He told his wife he was going out of town for the weekend and then hid in the woods behind their house. As he guessed, that evening, Tom showed up to take his lady out. The husband followed them to the nearby lover's lane. Tom and Eleanor were locked in a passionate embrace when, all of a sudden, they heard the car door open. Standing there were Eleanor's husband. His face was twisted with an evil grin, and his hand was clutching a hunting knife. Tom was scared out of his wits and began to beg for his life. He swore up and down that he didn't know Eleanor was married, but the husband didn't believe him. The wronged husband grabbed Tom by the ankles and dragged him out of the car, still bearing a sadistic grin upon his angry face. "Please don't kill me," begged Tom. "Oh no," said the husband. "I'm not going to kill you. I have something far worse in mind." With that, the husband dragged Tom off into the darkness. Cowering in the car, Eleanor couldn't see what was happening, but she was forced to listen to Tom's blood-curdling screams as they pierced the dark Tennessee night. Finally, her husband emerged from the darkness, his clothes covered in blood. Without a word, he climbed into the car and drove to the local police station where he turned himself in. The next morning, the police drove up to the crime scene and made a horrific discovery. Hanging from the branches of a tree was a pile of human skin. They realized that the husband hadn't killed Tom at all. He had skinned him. In fact, the jealous man had skinned Tom so well and so carefully that Tom was still alive by the end of the ordeal. The husband then draped Tom's hide over a branch and left him for dead. The police searched the area, but Tom was nowhere to be seen, and they could find no trace of the hunting knife either. They say that Tom still lurks around this area, waiting to catch a cheating couple, or to teach them the same lessons that he learned that fateful night. Once a handsome young man, He is now just a bloody skeleton stalking the little alleys and laneways with a big hunting knife clutched in his bony fingers. All of the teenagers in Tennessee are warned by their parents. Don't go to Lover's Lane. You don't want to be skinned Tom's next victim. So let's see what's going on in the comments, and then I am going to say pleasant nightmares. Disneyland had Thunder Mountain. Yes, they did. And then Liz says, I also heard of spirit fingers. Let's see. All right. Well, it looks like, let's see, Calvin says none of this has anything to do with moonshine the family was making. You mean still making. Still making. So we still have lots of wolf in the area. That's what some people call it. All right. So I hope you enjoyed that. Now to next, I don't want to say next week. My next show is we're going to talk about more of like the ghostly specters and things like that. And we're going to get into my favorite subject, my absolutely favorite subject, which is what people see on the Appalachian Trail, because this trail is one of the longest hiking trails I know in the United States, if not in the world. Maybe the Great Wall of China, maybe. But anyway, it goes from Georgia all the way up to Maine. And it is extremely difficult. A lot of people, you know, it's on a lot of people's bucket lists. A lot of people do it in what they call like parts. There's very few. Now there's you know, a couple hundred, but there's very few that actually have done it from start to finish, because it takes about 6 months. And you've really got to plan that right, because you definitely don't want to be up in those mountains when it starts to get cold. And we're going to get into some of the communities that still live up there, live up there to this day, because they have really decided to just kind of detach from society. Really interesting stuff. So, but those are my favorite kind of stories, is the haunted Appalachian Trail. So we're going to get into that. And then we're going to maybe delve into some of the lost tribes and things like that. So that's going to be fun. So again, I hope you enjoyed that. Definitely join me back for the next one. I'll let you guys know when it is. And grab some new merch and share us out. That's the best thing that you can do to help us. And also visit our website and our YouTube. And you can like our YouTube from our websites. You can watch us from our websites. You can order merch from our websites. You can do all kinds of things from our websites. We try to make it easy, very, very easy. So, and we're a little less censored on our website. Oh, and we also have a members area where you can watch a lot of the old good movies, like Blazing Saddles and Clockwork Orange and things like that. And there's some in there like Pink Flamingo that I will warn you. Not everybody can stomach Pink Flamingo. So, but you can message one of us to get the password for the members area if you don't already have it. So anyway, pleasant nightmares, everybody. I hope you have a wonderful rest of the week and weekend. And we will see you next time. Bye.
Who's that kid? In that booth? His mom told me about one time, and then he tried to kill my ass. Who's that kid? What's his name? I think he's selling heroin to the kids with the brains. Excuse me, I myself inside. There's infinite to provide. A setting for the drink I ordered.
This is Mr. Applewhite speaking. There is nothing wrong with your device. Join me here on Psycho Bunny DC. A delightfully dreadful consternation of horror content. Your head